Welcome to the Risk Wheelhouse, the podcast where we navigate the ever-changing seas of risk management and technology. Join your hosts, Ori Wellington and Sam Jones, as they steer you through the latest trends, insights, and strategies shaping the future of integrated risk management. Ready to chart a course towards success? Hop aboard and let's set sail into today's deep dive.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're zooming in on what feels like a pretty seismic shift in the corporate world. It's something that's really about to redefine transparency and trust for major UK companies. We're talking about Provision 29 of the UK Corporate Governance Code 2024. So if you're curious about what really goes on behind those boardroom doors, or maybe you're navigating corporate governance yourself, well, this deep dive is definitely for you. We'll break down what this new rule actually demands from boards, touch on the maybe unexpected costs, and look at some of the strategic ways companies are already adapting.
Yeah, it's a really crucial topic, often overshadowed by the sort of flashier headlines, but understanding these fundamental changes is just paramount. And like you said, this isn't just about ticking boxes, is it? It feels like a profound move towards building credible assurance, and it tackles what a lot of people are calling this growing trust deficit in big business. So yeah, we'll explore the details, pulling insights from recent analyses and expert projections to give, hopefully, the clearest picture possible.
Okay. Let's pull back the curtain then. Provision 29 sounds a bit like, I don't know, secret agent code or something. But its implications are pretty major, right? What exactly does this rule demand from companies starting in 2026?
Right. So at its core, Provision 29 requires UK company boards to do three main things. This is about their risk management and internal control framework. And it kicks in for financial years starting on or after January 1st, 2026. So first, they have to actively monitor and, crucially, conduct an annual review of this framework, active monitoring, annual review. Second, in their annual report, they need to describe how they did that review. The process, the scope, the methodology used. It's about showing their work. And third, and this, I think, is the really pivotal part, they have to declare whether the company's material controls were effective, right at the balance sheet date. And if any weren't effective, they've got to detail which ones, outline the specific fixes the remediation taken or planned, and explain how any past issues were sorted.
Wow, okay. That's quite a commitment to transparency, isn't it? About a company's sort of internal health check. But does this apply to everyone? Or are there specific types of companies this is really aimed at?
Good question. So the code itself applies primarily to companies listed in the FCA's, that's the Financial Conduct Authority's commercial companies category, and also closed-ended investment funds. There is a bit of flexibility, though. For example, externally managed investment companies, they can choose to use the AIC code instead, the Association of Investment Companies code. What's also really key here is the timing. The wider 2024 code starts January 1st, 2025. But Provision 29 itself, they've given an extra year. So that kicks in January 1st, 2026. It gives companies a bit of a runway, but honestly, we're already seeing many feeling the pressure to get ready now.
Right, that runway sounds important. And I also picked up it operates on a comply or explain basis. Yeah. And there's no mandatory external assurance. That sounds, well, like a bit of a tightrope walk. Companies get flexibility, but they also have this huge responsibility to be credible. What's the thinking there?
Exactly. It is a fascinating balance. That comply or explain principle, it does create flexibility. It lets boards adopt control frameworks that are genuinely fit for purpose for their specific company. The FRC, that's the Financial Reporting Council, their guidance really emphasizes this. It puts the ownership squarely on the company itself, internal accountability. But the market isn't really waiting for a mandate on the assurance side. Our analysis, it shows a really clear trend towards voluntary external assurance, especially in specific high-risk areas. Companies are realizing, I think, that even without a rule forcing them, getting that independent validation, it really helps de-risk those big board declarations, and it boosts investor confidence. So it's kind of credibility by choice, you could say, not just by rule.
Credibility by choice. I like that. Okay, so let's dig into the scope. When we hear internal controls, I think, most of us jump straight to finance, right? Financial statements, audits. But Provision 29 seems to cast a much wider net. It talks about material controls across financial, operational, reporting, and compliance domains. Yeah. What does material controls actually mean in this broader context, and why is that scope so significant today?
Yeah, this really does expand the horizon for boards. The FRC guidance is clear. What's material is company-specific. It's not some generic checklist. These controls, they should cover the company's principal risks. Any external reporting that might be price sensitive, obviously fraud prevention, and critically important now, information and technology risks. So this explicitly brings things like cybersecurity, data protection, even the governance around new tech like AI right into scope. It's a recognition, really, that in today's world, a company's biggest risks, and therefore its most important controls, often go way beyond just the financial figures. Think about it. A major cyber attack could be far more material than a small accounting error these days.
Absolutely. That expanded definition, it really shifts the goalposts, doesn't it? It's not just the balance sheet anymore. It's the company's digital backbone, data privacy, even AI governance. That's a huge leap. So how prepared are companies for this? Especially maybe for those non-financial controls. Is the market ready?
Well, readiness is, let's say, uneven. And here's where it gets really interesting, actually. Boards aren't just gearing up, they seem to be getting more realistic. So recent checks on FTSE 350 companies, they show good progress in planning for the declaration. About 82% mention planned activities in their latest reports. That's up significantly from 64% the year before. So planning is happening. However, there's still a big gap when you look at those non-financial reporting controls. Only 30% clearly stated these were covered by their monitoring and review, and that number hasn't changed from the previous year, still 30%. And what's even more striking, perhaps, is that the number of companies reporting positive conclusions on their overall system effectiveness actually fell. It dropped to 32% in the latest reports, down from 50% the year before.
Wow, 50 down to 32%. That's quite a drop.
It is, but I don't think it's necessarily a sign of things getting worse. It feels more like a sign that the bar has been raised. Companies are looking harder, applying more rigor, maybe being more honest with themselves as that deadline looms. It's a tightening of standards, you could argue, not a collapse. But it definitely highlights where the real heavy lifting still needs to be done, particularly on those non-financial controls.
That makes sense. A dose of realism kicking in. Is this drop purely a reaction to Provision 29, do you think? Or does it maybe also show that how companies used to assess non-financial controls wasn't quite cutting it? What's the most surprising thing you're seeing from the companies that are getting ahead of this?
It's probably a bit of both, yeah. The provision forces a harder look, and maybe previous assessments were a bit less thorough, especially outside finance. The biggest surprise for me, it's how proactive the leading companies are being. They're not waiting around for 2026. They're already mapping principal risks to specific controls, building out or refining a central controls register, doing gap analyses on their assurance. And many are even doing dry run declarations this year in their FY 2025 reports, just to test the whole process end to end. And a really crucial step they're taking is clarifying who actually owns the oversight for these non-financial controls. That seems to be a key area needing attention pretty much everywhere.
Okay, dry runs, central registers. Sounds like serious preparation. But change, especially this kind of change, usually comes with a price tag. Implementing new governance frameworks isn't cheap. So for companies gearing up for Provision 29, what sort of investment are we actually talking about here? And maybe how does it stack up against something well-known like, say, Sarbanes-Oxley in the U.S.?
Yeah, cost is definitely a big factor, and the estimates do vary quite a bit. Depends on the company's size, complexity, how mature their controls are already. Just for context, the UK government did an impact analysis for an earlier, slightly narrower proposal, one focused just on internal control over financial reporting, ICFR. That suggested transitional costs around £330,000 per company, with ongoing costs maybe £60,000 a year. Now, if you look at US SOX, specifically Section 404, which deals with internal controls over financial reporting, the internal costs there for bigger companies, they typically range from, say, $1 million to $1.8 million. So quite a bit higher, but also more prescriptive.
Right. Those are definitely significant numbers, particularly that initial setup cost. What do you see as the biggest hurdle for companies facing these costs for the first time?
I think the biggest hurdle is probably underestimating the upfront investment needed to build a truly integrated framework. One that covers all the domains: financial, operational, reporting, compliance, IT, not just finance. So based on those benchmarks, a reasonable planning range for, let's say, a typical FTSE 250 company that isn't already doing SOX, maybe with moderate complexity, you're probably looking at £300,000 to £600,000 in year one for the build. Then it drops down, typically maybe £125,000 to £250,000 a year for the ongoing steady state operation. Now, for companies already doing SOX 404, the extra cost for Provision 29 is much lower, maybe only 10 to 30% on top of their existing SOX budget. Because they have a lot of the groundwork done, they mainly need to extend it to cover those non-financial and compliance controls. But For a really large, complex, maybe highly decentralized FTSE 100 company, especially if they've grown through acquisition and have fragmented systems, year one could easily hit £800,000, maybe even up to £1.5 million.
Okay, so potentially a hefty investment for those starting from scratch, but you can leverage existing systems if you have them. Now, you mentioned earlier that external assurance isn't mandatory under the code, yet analysts are predicting what maybe half of companies will choose to spend more money to get it voluntarily. Why would they do that? This seems a bit counterintuitive to volunteer for extra cost and scrutiny.
Yeah, it does seem counterintuitive at first glance, doesn't it? But this is a really crucial insight into how the market's reacting. It's about proactive credibility management. Even though the code doesn't force their hand, the projection is, yes, by the FY 2026 reporting cycle, at least 50% of these UK groups will voluntarily seek some targeted external assurance on selected material controls. Why? Two main reasons, I think. One, to genuinely de-risk their board declaration. They want to reduce the potential blowback liability, reputational damage, investor doubt if something goes wrong later. And two, to actively boost investor confidence, signaling to the market that their statement isn't just self-assessed, but it stood up to some independent scrutiny. Boards might focus this extra spending strategically, perhaps on really high-risk areas, things like cybersecurity access controls, maybe critical data privacy processes, or even those increasingly important ESG metrics that could be price-sensitive. So it reflects a shift, I think, from just doing the minimum for compliance towards a strategic commitment to demonstrating robust governance. It's like buying an insurance policy for their corporate reputation.
An insurance policy for their reputation. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So given these costs and the sheer breadth of Provision 29, companies must be looking for smart ways to manage this, efficient ways. And that brings us to something called integrated risk management, or IRM platforms. How exactly does this kind of technology help companies tackle Provision 29, both efficiently and effectively?
Are you ready to see risk management in action? At Wheelhouse Advisors, we've launched a new YouTube channel dedicated to integrated risk management. You'll find quick explainers, insights from our IRM Navigator research reports, highlights from the Risk Journal, and conversations from the Risk Wheelhouse podcast. We're covering the topics that matter most to executives and risk leaders, from AI governance and cyber insurance to operational resilience and regulatory change. Every video is designed to help you anticipate risks, adapt with confidence, and build resilience in a digital-first world. In our first video, we explain how ISO 42001, the EU AI Act, and the NIST AI Risk Management Framework can work together as a unified playbook for AI risk. Subscribe today at youtube.com/@wheelhouseadv and get the latest insights delivered directly to you. That's youtube.com/@wheelhouseadv. Subscribe now and stay ahead of the risks that matter most.
You know, it almost sounds like that classic problem trying to see your whole house's security, but half the sensors are old, half are new, and none of them talk to each other. How does IRM fix that?
That's a perfect analogy, actually. IRM is almost tailor-made for Provision 29, precisely because the provision demands that single, unified, board-level view across all these different risk types. What IRM does is it unifies risk, controls, and all the assurance activities, testing, monitoring, audits within one single operating model, and crucially, one data environment. It's about bringing it all together, creating that single source of truth instead of juggling loads of different spreadsheets, disconnected systems, manual processes. It gets all those different security sensors talking to each other and feeding into one central dashboard for the board.
Right, getting everything talking. That sounds like it could be a real game changer. Can you give us some specific, concrete examples of how these IRM platforms actually deliver efficiency improvements for companies facing this Provision 29 challenge?
Absolutely. On the efficiency side, IRM offers several really key benefits. First, that unified material controls register we talked about. This maps all your main risks to the specific controls meant to mitigate them. Across all domains, financial, operational, compliance, reporting, IT, AI, everything. This alone cuts out huge amounts of duplication and makes scoping much simpler. Second, control rationalization. Because you have that single view using common language, common taxonomies, companies typically find they can remove somewhere between 15 and 30% of duplicate or just low-value controls. Often in the first year, that's a big saving in effort. Third, automated evidence collection and workflow. This is huge. It integrates the day-to-day checks done by the business teams, the first line, with the oversight from risk and compliance, the second line, and the testing done by internal audit, the third line. It automates the handoffs, the evidence gathering, the sign-offs, cuts down massively on manual chasing, improves the audit trail, and frees people up for higher value work. And finally, something called continuous control monitoring. For really critical or high-risk processes, you can use system logs, data analytics, to monitor controls almost in real time. This spots issues much faster and can actually help stabilize assurance costs over time by being more proactive.
Okay, so it makes things smoother, less manual, potentially cheaper in the long run. But beyond just efficiency, how does IRM make the whole control framework more effective? How does it help meet the real spirit of Provision 29?
That's the other side of the coin, effectiveness. And IRM delivers here too. It helps create a much stronger link from the board's risk appetite right down to the material controls. You can tie key risk indicators directly to how well specific controls are performing. This means the board's oversight is focused precisely on the areas that genuinely matter most to the company's strategy and risk tolerance. It enables board-ready reporting. Good IRM platforms can basically generate the reports the board needs for Provision 29. Things like coverage maps showing risks and controls, heat maps highlighting ineffective controls, real-time status updates on fixing problems. This makes the board's job much easier and more informed. And, crucially, it facilitates that technology risk integration. Cyber risks, data protection controls, AI governance, they all sit within the same unified framework, the same register as financial controls. This gives that holistic single view of tech risk, which, as we've said, is just becoming absolutely central for almost every business. It's exactly what the FRC guidance encourages.
That integrated view, especially for tech risks, seems incredibly important now. Okay, so as we get closer to that 2026 deadline, what's the general feeling? What's the outlook for how companies are going to adapt? What are the experts projecting for the next few years? And maybe most importantly, what advice are they giving right now to help companies navigate this smoothly?
Yeah, we're seeing some pretty clear trend signals emerging. As we mentioned, analysts are forecasting that by the FY 2026 reporting cycle, that 50% figure for voluntary external assurance seems likely, companies wanting to bolster their declaration. Looking a bit further out, say by 2027, the expectation is that maybe 2/3 of FTSE 350 companies will be managing both their financial controls, ICFR, and their non-financial reporting controls within one single integrated framework, using platforms like IRM. Now, that's a really significant shift, especially when you remember only 30% clearly cover non-financial controls today. And also by 2027, forecasts suggest at least a quarter, maybe 25% of the FTSE 350 will be using that continuous control monitoring technology on their most critical high-risk processes. So definitely a move towards integration and automation.
Okay, so integration, automation, and that strategic use of voluntary assurance seem to be the key trends. For people listening who are maybe right in the thick of this on boards in finance, risk, audit, what are the most practical, immediate steps they can take now to get ahead of this curve?
The recommendations are pretty clear and quite actionable, depending on your role. For boards and audit committees, the strong advice is approve a proportionate Provision 29 roadmap now. Don't wait. And make sure it culminates in doing one of those dry run declarations for your FY 2025 reporting. It's about practice, not just planning. They also need to decide early on where they might want that voluntary external assurance, focusing strategically on the areas that really matter for investor confidence or sensitive disclosures. Then, for the executive CFOs, chief risk officers, chief audit executives, the key actions are build or refine that single unified material controls register. Make sure it meticulously maps principal risks to controls, clearly shows owners, frequency, how evidence is gathered, and who provides assurance. And critically, ensure it includes IT and non-financial reporting controls from the start. They also need to actively rationalize those controls, get rid of the clutter, standardize testing approaches where possible, implement or extend IRM tools to automate workflows, and finally, define a really clear board-facing reporting pack that lines up perfectly with what Provision 29 requires. It's not just about doing the work, it's about being ready to report on it effectively and with confidence.
Right. Getting the reporting right is just as crucial as getting the controls right. Well, we've certainly taken a deep dive into Provision 29 today. From its core rules and that broad scope, through to the costs, and these smart integrated solutions like IRM, it seems pretty clear this isn't just another tick box exercise, is it? It feels more like a genuine opportunity for companies to build stronger, more transparent foundations, and hopefully foster greater trust.
I think that's exactly right. This shift towards these comprehensive material control declarations, it really reflects a more mature, more sophisticated understanding of what corporate responsibility and resilience actually mean today. It's pushing boards to think much more actively about how interconnected risks are. Financial stability isn't separate from cybersecurity, which isn't separate from AI governance. It's all linked. It's encouraging them to view the whole enterprise through this single lens of control and accountability.
So what does all this mean for you listening in? Well, whether you're an investor trying to decipher annual reports, a business leader setting strategy, or maybe just someone who believes in well-run, trustworthy organizations, understanding these internal mechanisms, this plumbing, is becoming absolutely vital. It really offers a glimpse into the true operational health of a company.
And maybe this leaves us with an important question to ponder, actually. As boards become much more transparent about their internal controls, about their risk management, openly declaring what's working well, but also what isn't, how might this unprecedented level of visibility really influence things in the long run? How will it shape investor behavior, public perception of corporate integrity? Will it genuinely breed more trust, or could it perhaps lead to even greater scrutiny? It's definitely something worth mulling over as these fundamental changes start to roll out across the UK corporate landscape.
That's a great thought to end on. Will more transparency lead to more trust or just more questions? Something to watch. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope this has given you a much clearer and maybe more actionable picture of this crucial development in corporate governance. Until next time, keep digging, keep learning.
That wraps up another episode of the Risk Wheelhouse. Thank you for spending time with us at Wheelhouse Advisors today. We hope you found the conversation insightful and actionable for your organization's risk strategies. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon Music. If you're looking for more in-depth analysis and thought leadership on risk technology, be sure to visit the Risk Tech Journal at therisktechjournal.com. It's your go-to source for comprehensive articles, expert interviews, and the latest trends shaping the industry. Subscribe today to stay informed. For any inquiries or feedback, please contact us directly at info@wheelhouseadvisors.com, or feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn and x.com and share your thoughts or suggestions for future topics. Visit wheelhouseadvisors.com for more information and resources. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, navigate wisely.